higher, faster, and stronger. And that's what all athletes want, ladies and gentlemen. And javelin throwers, marathon runners, every single kind of athlete wants this kind of better results. However, ladies and gentlemen, because until now there has been total ban on performance enhancement drugs that we are discussing in the status quo, this is the reason they could not fly higher, fight faster, and stronger. So the team proposition in this motion today supports, thinks, why not support to a certain extent of this use of drugs? Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, as the Prime Minister of this debate, I'd like to first define the motion clearly before I move on to my own arguments. Would define allow as to permit the use of, but I'd like to analyze this into two levels. One, with additional doctor, health surgeon who can care about the health and the effect of those drugs, and which will allow treatment for all players available. Two, by governmental aid and league management, which will guarantee that there is no overuse of drugs, and two, that there is no harm on health. We define performance enhancement drugs as all drugs that develop an athlete's training records. We define sports as all sports in both amateur and professional fields. Now that we have a clear definition of the motion today, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the team stance on why we're advocating this policy. We see, ladies and gentlemen, that current laws and regulations are so inefficient, are so time-consuming, and not cost-effective. We also see, ladies and gentlemen, that this policy is not this policy in the status quo is not morally justifiable, and because there are illegal uses of drugs, performance enhancement drugs must be proposed. So, ladies and gentlemen, we see that there is a clear need for allowing performance enhancement drugs under one condition, and this relates to the policy that we are discussing in the status quo, which is one, allowing performance enhancement drugs until in certain extent and in certain types. This will, one, solve the problem of polarization, because certain types of drugs because we will allow certain types of drugs which will be available for all players and for all nations. And because we'll be setting up international agencies which is composed of pharmaceutical companies, sports experts, and pharmacists who are experts about that field, we will be guaranteeing that there's no polarization among athletes or among nations. Two, the policy of certain extent and certain types of drugs will not harm the health of athletes because they will be regulated to use certain kind and certain extent. Two, the policy also relates to education, which will focus on letting athletes be aware of the benefits and harms that drugs may pose, and why they might or might not use drugs in certain fields, and why the drugs are in need in certain areas. Now, well, this is the policy. This is the basic policy that we are advocating. To support this policy, we have came up with basically two arguments, and I, as the Prime Minister, will discuss about the inefficiency of the status quo and analyze this in two levels. The excellent Deputy Prime Minister will show you how this is morally how this policy is morally justifiable in one public level and two in individual levels. Now, on to the first argument. We say, because the status quo is so inefficient, ladies and gentlemen, there is a clear need for change. First level, there's actually no distinction between natural and unnatural enhancement of the status quo. Because athletes of all kind use all kinds of resources to develop as athletes, such as dietary supplement, exercises, equipment, clothing, medical treatments. Now, see, ladies and gentlemen, they're all artificial, not natural. So the team proposition asserts that there's no clear way of distinguishing between natural and unnatural natural athletes, because there has been such artificial factors included in the status quo. Because, ladies and gentlemen, therefore, we say that because of such illegitimacy, the drugs should be allowed in the status quo. On to the second level. That rules are arbitrary and unfair. In the Olympics, ladies and gentlemen, for example, cold medicines are not allowed, even if in some areas of sports, while the use of drugs only pose minimal differences. And there's possibility of positive tests being result of combination of legal food supplement, ladies and gentlemen. And there are cyclists who have had heart operations before, and there's no clear distinction between the rules that we have in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. So because the rules are arbitrary and fair, we see there is a clear need for this policy, and we see, ladies and gentlemen, that athletes should be allowed to fly higher, faster, and stronger. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, and Madam Speaker, why is performance-enhancing drugs banned in the Olympics? Why is these performance-enhancing drugs banned in the Major Baseball League? Why is it banned in the British Premier League? The opposition will show you the answer to the questions and show that the motion, this House would allow performance-enhancing drugs in sports. This motion, why this motion should not stand. First of all, I will show you why we like sports, the fundamental reasons for liking sports, and which is the fairness between the sports, and how the performance-enhancing drugs will break the fairness. And my partner will elaborate on each aspect of the liking of sports and show how it will cause economic and social harm to the country. But before I go on to my arguments, I would like to rebut some of the arguments that the first proposition speaker has said. The first proposition speaker has said that there are illegal uses of drugs, so we should just legalize it. However, the proposition has failed to mention that these illegal uses of drugs are the athletes who uses these illegal types of drugs are always caught. The dope testing is
Sir.
No, thank you, sir. Is a way to catch these people, and just saying because the illegal uses of drugs do occur does not mean that we should not.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
That is why exactly the reason why I told you that positive tests are sometimes a combination of legal food supplements.
Okay, thank you, sir. But it still does not mean that illegal uses of drugs do not exactly. The occurrence of legal uses of drugs do not mean that we should make this motion should stand. Also, they said that drugs there's no difference between natural and artificial because they all affect how the sports. But the problem with this performance-enhancing drug is that it affects the body itself. Let's say, for example, materials. Swimming, for example, in swimming, there are swimming suits which will enhance the record of the swimming people. However, it does not enhance the player's ability. It does not make the player able to swim faster because he can take more breaths in. But all it does, it makes the mechanism of swimming much more easier. It does not, but this performance enhancement drugs affects the body itself. And that is why this motion, that's one of the rebuttals. And to my arguments, ladies and gentlemen, why do we like sports? There's 3 reasons. First of all, it's for sheer fun. We like to watch athletes chase after balls, compete each other. It's just fun to watch. But in this fun, there's another reason. It's the inspiration that the athletes actually give to us. It's inspiring to watch these athletes work hard. They work and they try their best. And we see them get their best results. It's inspiring to see the athletes get that.
Sir.
No, thank you, sir. And this is actually one of the reasons that athletes are role models to the children and to many fans, which will be elaborated by my partner. But the real reason behind the liking of sports is the fairness in sports. Ladies and gentlemen, this society is corrupted. We cannot deny the fact. It's corrupted, and there are very few fair things in the whole society. However, sports itself is one of the remaining few things that are fair. In sports, using rules and regulations, we can control and make sure that sports are fair. And one of the basic rules and regulations to making sports fair is prohibiting performance-enhancing drugs. The basic rule is, but if we allow the motion to stand, we are allowing the fundamental mind in sports to crumble. We are allowing the fundamental mind, which is sportsmanship. The objective of sports is fair competition. But if we use performance enhancement drugs, it will not make the competition fair. For example, a team is using performance enhancing drugs and a team is not using performance enhancing drugs. What will happen if they have a match? What will happen? It's pretty obvious what will happen. The team using the performance enhancement drugs will almost automatically win. And that will happen, and that will lead to the fairness being there will be no fairness in this whole debate, in the whole sports. So, this is why the opposition argues that the motion, this House would allow performance enhancement drugs to be banned, in sports to not stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Higher, faster, and stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what athletes, managers, the general public, and the athletes themselves require from athletes. And now they'll be able to do so with the legalization of steroids and other performance enhancement drugs. We stand on the motion today that this House will allow the use of performance enhancement drugs, and I, as the Deputy Prime Minister, will go on to substantiate the second half of our arguments and go on to rebut the previous speaker. Now, before we actually go on to substantiate our arguments, I shall rebut the previous speaker. Okay, there were several points of controversy that the previous speaker actually conveyed to us. First, that performance enhancement drugs affect the body itself and is not fair. However, when you think about that, other types of performance enhancing substances, such as vitamins, the surgeries, as the Prime Minister said, for example, the surgeries that the cyclists get to enhance their own bodies, and all the clothing themselves also, they also affect the body, they also affect how they play, how the athletes play. So, should they all banned? Should the vitamins, should the surgeries, should the clothing, the special clothing, should they all be banned? No, ladies and gentlemen. Instead, we should legalize the use of performance enhancement drugs in sports for the reasons I will actually explain in the later arguments. He also mentioned that the sports we like them because they are fair. We don't deny this point. However, you have to face the reality here. You have to face the reality that all sports are not always fair. Why? Well, because although there are regulations on not using these drugs in sports, the rules, they're made to be broken, let's say. The rules are always broken. There have been many cases of drug-using athletes succeeding in their fields. There have been cases reported when another player reported a player of using drugs but were not caught. You cannot deny that this is not working. No, thank you. Moreover, because of this unfairness in the games, we should legalize the drugs for open competition and sportsmanship, which the opposition just mentioned. Sure. Go on.
How can it be sportsmanship when it is unfair?
How is it unfair? Well, we actually mentioned, even with the bans, which the opposition team is stating, it is still unfair because there are also athletes who use drugs in the games. However, the Prime Minister, as he kindly actually mentioned in his speech, we will restrict the amount, the qualities, the quantities of drugs that can be used in sports, thus providing more sportsmanship, more fairness, and more equality in those games. Now, going on to our arguments. My arguments will be primarily based on the morals. First of all, the private morals. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone knows that the risk, the detrimental effects of all drugs, especially these performance enhancing drugs, which are meant to change the body and how they work. And we also know that the misuse and the over-excessive use of drugs can bring diseases, fatality, death. We all know that. All athletes should know that. However, although professionals in the playing field, people should be able to freely choose what they actually intake and what it actually takes to win. As long as it doesn't convey harm to the other people, to the other players, they can, as it is a responsibility of the government to provide freedom of choice to our citizens, which includes our players. Yes, sir.
Isn't destroying the fairness of sports actually harming other players?
Well, as we actually mentioned, this is actually increasing the fairness of sports and thus protecting the rights of the players. Going on. Moreover, it is their choice if they want to intake drugs, and there will be little harm because we actually mentioned in our policies that we shall consider doctors, we shall hire doctors to actually control the quantity, the choice of drugs to fit the players. Moreover, there will be also information of drugs, open medical supervision, so there won't be any health problems related as little as possible. Moreover, there's also this is no different from all the diets, the medical help they're already getting. So, moreover, along with the education policy that the Prime Minister mentioned, there will also be an increase in the morals so that all the students, they won't be affected in taking drugs. Second half, the public morals. This will level the playing field. There is already suspicion about every game, every player, that they're using steroids, drugs in this field. For instance, Olympics, baseball games, whatever games they are, there always has been suspicion in the playing field. For instance, let's see Barry Bonds. Everyone knows Barry Bonds. He's the most famous player in baseball history. However, he has been suspected of using steroids, although he has never been caught. He has been suspected. Ladies and gentlemen, with the legalization with drugs, this will allow open competition as athletes are free to use steroids. Moreover, since the government is taking this into action and controlling the quantity, the quality of these drugs, and having international organizations to provide international standards, this will be quite fair. Ladies and gentlemen,